Hello, AP History students. This is Mr. Claus, and I am here to try to walk you through the document-based question. As a reminder, on the AP exam format, the DBQ is the third thing. So after the multiple choice, the short answer questions, then we get a short break, and then we're going to do the document-based question, followed by the long essay question, which, despite its name, is not the longest portion. So this is the third element of the AP exam. It is worth 25% of your exam score. There's one prompt, and you write that prompt. There is no choice. You'll have 60 minutes to complete this essay. Recommendation is 15 minutes for brainstorming and 45 for writing, but obviously you can adjust that however you need to. As always with your essays, I am begging you to do all the brainstorming you need before you start writing. Much better to do 20 or even 25 minutes of brainstorming and know where you want to go rather than rushing into the writing and discover you're just talking about stuff and not actually heading toward any particular destination. Okay, let's start with our pre-writing. So we get the topic, we get a packet. It's got several documents and a question. So the first thing we want to do is look at that prompt. Let's analyze the prompt. We start the exact same way on a DBQ as we do on an LEQ. So let's read and mark up the prompt. Take a close look at every single word in the prompt. We have to answer exactly what is asked. If we don't do that, we will be off topic and we get no credit if we're off topic. So if it says that we're supposed to be talking about economic changes and we end up talking about social changes, there's no credit whatsoever for that. Or if we just whatever we do, it's got to be exactly what the prompt says. We also want to identify that historical thinking skill. So every AP essay, both LEQ, DBQ, is going to ask us to do one of three things. If we can't remember them, we remember they usually start with C, most of them. So as we read the prompt closely, we're going to highlight, circle, or write down the time and place limits, the specific things that we need to talk about, and then that historical thinking skill, which is one of these things. So comparison, or causation, or change, or continuity over time. You can get this part wrong in a sense, so you can write an essay that uses a different skill than they are inviting you to use, but it's very hard to stay on topic. I've rarely seen someone mistake this and still do well on the essay as a whole. So strong recommendation on take your time, figure out which of these things is it inviting you to do, and then make sure that you do it. Okay. Like the long essay question, you need to have a thesis or claim that is decisive but not extreme. And so we need to take a stand. We can't just sort of echo the prompt and say, that's a good question, but we got to answer it. Often the easiest position is going to be to defend whatever the prompt implies. However, with the LEQ, we're not going to pick right away what our thesis is because we haven't looked at the evidence yet. So just as a reminder, the sort of theses that are safe for a comparison question, you could say A and B, or even A, B, and C were all equally important, or we could rank them and say A was the most important or more important than B. Any of those is fine. We just can't kind of say, yeah, they were all causes. Like that's not the same thing. Okay, same thing with causation. So we can, our safe places, it'll usually say to what extent did A affect B? And our safe places here are either, yeah, it had a big effect, or it didn't have a very big effect. But we don't want to deny it had any effect at all, nor do we want to say that it was the only thing that had an effect. We want to take a stand that is defensible. For change in continuity, again, same sort of thing as the causation. Like, yeah, a lot changed or not very much changed. Either of those is safe. The AP readers are not looking for you to take a particular stand on that. You just have to take a defensible stand. So you should be good there. All right. So we're not going to pick our thesis yet because, as I said, we haven't looked at our evidence. The evidence is in the documents. It is a DBQ, so it is literally document based. So we're going to have to read and analyze those documents. All right. For each document, I would recommend taking a look at that sourcing information that's going to be preceding each document. Look at that information before you even read the document and see, is there anything about the historical situation or the audience or the purpose or the point of view that stands out as like, oh, I could offer a little analysis about that. And then in the course of our essay, of course, we're going to have to explain why that matters to us as historians. And so we want to kind of do that before we even read the document. Do any of those stand out? And we only have to do this, remember, for our 1 point, we only got to mention this 2 of these in our entire essay. And we can actually earn a 2nd point if we do 4 or more. So if you're pretty good at this, like, go for it. This is an easy way to earn the kind of contextualization point. All right, so we're going to write our happy above each document, just sort of circle like, oh, this is a king, and so he's going to be, trying to get the people to obey him, whatever. We're also going to mark up the document for the same reason that we mark up the prompt. We want to catch those details, and I may be reading a document now and not going to use it for 40, 50 minutes even. So I don't want to have to go back and reread it. I'm going to quickly summarize then each document right underneath it. So even physically, I'll try to set this up when I do it for sourcing information above the document, mark up the document a little bit. Is there any line or phrase or word that sort of stands out? And then finally, below the document, summarize it in, not even a sentence, but something that I can grab it for later use without having to reread the document. None of this, of course, is graded. So this is for you. Don't use, use enough words for each part of this that you can figure out how to use it later, but also don't write any more than is necessary. It's not like your reader's even going to look at this stuff. All right, just to keep in mind, what do we got to do to earn our points? So for this, using the documents and sourcing the documents, we need, in order to earn a point, or the points that are available, we must support our argument using 4 documents. So that should be the minimum as we're reading the documents. As long as there's 4, or preferably more than that we understand, we're good. But we can earn that 7th point if we use all 7. So I would encourage you to make every effort to use all of the documents. Not only does that give you a shot at the complexity points, but in case one of your 4 documents is misinterpreted, you've got backup. You have insurance against losing that point. If I only try for 4 and I misunderstand 1, I don't get the point. It's 4 or nothing. So make sure that you do that. If there are any documents that you run into while you're doing this that you don't understand, don't try to use them. Like, don't waste time on that. There are other ways to get our complexity point. So if you run into a document or even 2 that you just, I don't get it, I don't like it, just skip it. Pretend you never even looked at it and don't worry about it. Okay. We also have to do that sourcing information, mentioning the historical situation or audience or purpose or point of view for at least 2 documents, but we get a bonus point if we do it for 4 or more. So again, I'd recommend trying more than 2 so that you have insurance if one of them is not correctly interpreted. But again, if we can do this for 5, 6, or even 7 of them, that bonus point's in play. All right. Now, when I'm done reading the documents, the next thing I want to do is kind of group those documents together. And in class, we do this like, we physically chop up the piece of paper to group them. But we want to group them together by documents that kind of can prove the same sort of thing. So I would recommend at least one group of documents that sort of support the implication of the prompt, and at least one group that kind of supports an alternative view of the prompt. But we probably want to subdivide one or both of these groups. So you may have, for instance, some documents that support the implication of the prompt for kind of one reason or through one lens, and then some other documents that have a different take but arrive at the same conclusion. So it's that kind of thing. Remember, you're going to have to do this. So you are going to have to see the connections. The documents in your packet are not going to be all, documents that were written intentionally to address each other. We have invented this question. We have invented this topic. It's up to us to find the conversation between the documents. It won't be just automatic or natural. Okay. If you need to, you can have a group of documents that's just one. That's okay. And we can do that as a separate paragraph. That's fine. Really what we're doing by grouping the documents is organizing our body paragraphs for later. What I would not do, though, is have a vaguely defined group. Each group should be able to be kind of labeled as far as what it is or what it proves. Don't have like and the other stuff. Like that's not a group. That's it's not a line of reasoning is really what we're getting at. So if you don't really know how a document fits in, just don't use it. Like throw it away. And as long as you've got 4 or more, you're still all right. Okay. Now, a brief note in terms of comparing the DBQ and the LEQ. A lot about them is the same. The contextualization point is the same, and the claim format is the same. But if you remember on the LEQ, this use of historical reasoning to frame or structure an argument, that's an independent standalone point. And so that's something that's like in the rubric. And on the LEQ, that's an easy thing to do because you get to choose all of the evidence, and so you can go out of your way to only choose evidence that points in the direction you want it to. With the DBQ, of course, you don't get to, you come up with a little bit of the evidence, but the evidence is largely the documents. So even though there's a same historical thinking skill and similar claim format, it's not this use of that is not on the rubric. And I think part of it is because they are going to intentionally give you evidence that points in different directions. In fact, as you're reading the documents, if you find that they all agree, you have misread probably at least 2 of them. So they will intentionally not all point the same direction, and you're going to have to wrestle with that. So in the case of the DBQ, compared to the LEQ, I would strongly recommend introducing a counter argument both in your opening paragraph and also in a body paragraph. And I would do that because otherwise you're not going to be able to use some of your evidence, some of the documents. So I would introduce that. So when I write a thesis for this, you kind of want to restate those key parts of the prompt, the date, and all those sorts of things. But like Heimler's history recommends, despite whatever a counter argument might be, so the smaller pile of documents and the direction they point. So despite that, here's my argument, not using first person, of course, because of this and because of that, with that line of reasoning. Another way that you can, so again, you're going to do this, introduce this counter argument in your thesis paragraph on DBQs. You can do it on LEQs, and it's not a bad thing. Like it's a great thing because it shows complexity. But I think for most of my students, I would recommend doing this on the DBQ, and I would not recommend doing it on the LEQ. So you can take that advice or leave it, but I would do it here. So other ways you could kind of think of this, just again, restating the key parts of the prompt. So despite the counter argument, here's my argument as seen in this and as seen in that. Or, essentially what you're doing here is you're using those documents. So despite, this counter view with a group of documents that points a certain way, here's where this other pile of documents, the majority pile of documents points. So you can kind of use this format, and that's how I would construct that. Now, we're still not done preparing. So we've read and marked up the prompt. We identified a historical thinking skill. We read and analyzed the documents. We grouped those documents. Now that we've actually looked at the evidence, it's time to decide on a thesis and line of reasoning. So which way do we want to lean when we take a stand that is decisive but not extreme? And also, as we're doing that, we need to do a little bit of brainstorming, not as much as the LEQ, but some we have to do. So contextualization and evidence beyond the documents. So just like the LEQ, the contextualization, this is basically setting the scene for the topic. We're going to write 3 or 4 sentences to begin our essay and historically set the scene. So we got to kind of lead up to not just random stuff that was going on before this period, but like the trends within this field or topic that lead up to the prompt. We've got to show that we don't just understand what's in the packet, but we can place it in a bit of historical context. So we need to brainstorm a few specific things there. I have said this before, but like when students miss this point, it's not usually because they're wrong or they're not trying. They're just way too vague. They say things like, lots of changes were happening, and like nobody's fooled. If you just say lots of changes but you don't actually name any changes, then you are just guessing. So make this specific. The other thing that we need for the DBQ is evidence beyond the documents, is what they call it. So we need at least one piece of evidence beyond the documents that works with the documents to support our claim. The challenge here, of course, we can't do this brainstorming until we read the documents, because until we've read the documents, we don't know what is in or not in them. All right, so we need one piece of evidence beyond the documents, and there will be good options here. So the College Board will not take all the good ideas and put it in the documents and then say, fine, now think of something now that we took all the good stuff. There will be some very obvious and easily grabbable topics you can cover. All right, so we do that little bit of brainstorming, and now finally, after we do our brainstorming, we can use this grapiest acronym if we need to. Like our brain is fried, and we can't even think about what to think about. This could be a useful tool. Now we're finally ready to write an opening paragraph. Okay, with our opening paragraph, again, I've already shown you the model for that, but we want to earn 2 points here and set up a third one. So our contextualization is worth a point. We're going to kind of 3 or 4 sentences of broader events from before this period, and then our thesis format, which I've shown you before, is that despite this, here's my claim because of this, because of that. So these are the points we're earning. So we earn a contextualization point by showing this topic's historical situation and background, what preceded and led up to this topic. Show expertise, be as specific as you can. Again, don't just talk about kings were being aggressive. That doesn't say anything. Like it, give it what kings and in what ways were they being aggressive. Give some examples. Aim for 3-ish, maybe 4-ish sentences here with the contextualization. Then, of course, because despite this, so introduce a counterclaim, which is going to set up our ability to use that in the documents later, and then make your claim. And stay within the time topic limits, be decisive but not extreme, build that historical thinking skill into it, and then because of this and because of that, or as seen in this and as seen in that. And so that is those 2 elements, the claim and line of reasoning combined, are worth a point. And again, our format, as you can see on the screen, is one that you can just sort of plug and chug and go on to the next thing. Body paragraph time. Now, the body paragraphs, we have a lot of things going on, a lot of things that we have to do. So let's talk about that. The points we're earning are these. So we're going to take one of our groups of documents, and we're going to explain the content of those documents. I recommend that the third bullet there, cited after use, I recommend putting in parentheses after you use a document, doc, and then whatever the number or letter of that document is. And I recommend this because your reader may be in a hurry, and unlike me, they're not going to go back and reread and make sure they didn't miss anything. If it doesn't pop out at them in the first time as they speed through it, like you're just not going to get the point. So putting the document number in parentheses is a helpful indicator to your reader, like, hey, I just used document 3, and that way they don't miss it. Point number 3 on the rubric requires doing this 3 times. Point number 4 requires doing it 4 times and then actually applying the reasoning. Also, one of our paths to point number 7, the complexity point, is using all of the documents. So I would say that at an absolute minimum, you have to use 3 or 4, preferably 4 for that second point. But I would strongly urge you that if you understand all 7 documents, you try to use all 7 documents. And if you don't, that you still use 5 or 6, and just to be safe and have that insurance. Okay. When we use a document, we can't just say document 1 says this and or just quote at it. We have to explain what it's saying in our own words. All right. Then in addition to saying, hey, here's what this document says, we've got to use it to support an argument. So what does the content of that document prove relative to the prompt and to our claim and to the essay as a whole? If we do this 4 times, then we've locked down our couple of evidence points. And again, if we're going to use all 7 documents, then we got to do this. All right, so then we also, at some point in our body paragraph, probably want to introduce our one piece of specific evidence beyond the documents. So this is something not mentioned in the documents, but is relevant and helps to prove our case and is historical. So not just another reason on the same thing. With this, again, we need to show some detailed knowledge. We can't just talk in vague sorts of ways, and we have to use it to support our argument. So take your time, treat it like a document, and say several things about it, both explaining what happened and then reasoning why it proves your point. Quick pro tip here. So quoting the documents is allowed, but quoting a document doesn't prove that you actually understand it. Many of us have the experience we can say phrases in a foreign language and we don't even know what they mean. So quoting a document doesn't show that you understand it. So you can use a quote from a document, but it has to then be just sort of you teeing it up to then explain what that means. You also don't have to quote the documents. You can just explain the content of the document, but it's got to be your words. Also, another pro tip, frequently use phrases such as "for example," which is going to force you to use more evidence and explain things. And the phrases like "this proves" or "this shows," that is going to force you to do reasoning and explain, not just explain the content of the documents, but use them to make an argument. Okay? Also, somewhere in this paragraph, we got a lot going on. We need to at least once, and preferably more than once, identify about one of the documents the historical situation or audience or purpose or point of view, and explain why knowing that information makes is relevant to us as historians. So, like we know how to weigh this document more than we would at face value. If we do this twice successfully, that's point number 6. And if we do this 4 or more, that could be point number 7. So let me just kind of keep score and kind of show the outlines here as far as how we're doing this. So body paragraph 1, topic sentence number 1, it's going to be based on line of reasoning number 1 or document group, number 1. So we're going to kind of pile those together. We're going to explain the content of a document. And then we're going to use that document's content to support our argument. And we are going to repeat that process. We may, along the way, talk about the historical situation, audience, purpose, or point of view for that document. And if we do, we're always, of course, going to explain why that is insightful. All right. And then maybe we will also have the option here, but we got to do it sometime, of using evidence from beyond the documents. And again, we still have to use it to support our argument. We just can't say some fun facts and move on. Okay, so again, a lot going on here, but that's the stuff that can happen. Body paragraph 2 is exactly the same way. So we're going to take another group of documents, and you're allowed to overlap. So if I want to use document 1 in both body paragraph 1 and 2, like no problem. But we got to use it's how many total documents we use. So body paragraph here, number 2. Here you go. And just to remind you, we must use at least 4 total documents in our DBQ. To get that point, we also must do this sourcing for 2 or more documents, and to get our full credit there. And we must have at least one piece of evidence beyond the documents in our DBQ. All right. So if we've done all that, we've got an opening paragraph, contextualization, and then kind of narrowing down our body paragraph. This is the average body paragraph. So I might do happy 3 times in my opening paragraph and never again, or I may leave the extra evidence till a later paragraph. That's not a problem. But on average, use a couple of documents in the paragraph, use do a bit of happy analysis for at least one of the documents, introduce some evidence beyond the documents to and interpret it here. Same thing with body paragraph 2, explain the documents and interpret them, and off we go. And then the question arises, of course, like, well, now what? What comes next? So, so far, just to know the points we have, we've got our contextualization is a point. Our thesis claim and line of reasoning is a point. If we introduce evidence and just sort of explain the content of 3 documents, we get a point, but we want more than that. So we're actually going to do at least 4, explaining the content and using that explanation to support an argument relevant to the prompt. We're going to do this HAP sourcing for at least 2 documents, and we're also going to introduce 1 piece of evidence beyond the document. If we've done all that, we've already got a 6 out of 7 if we've done it well. So the question is what to do next? What else we got to do? Well, first, before you move on, just make sure that these are really nailed down. I've so many times seen students where I'm like 3/4 of the way through the essay, and it's like, no, that's not quite it. Nope, that's off topic. No, that's iffy. And all of a sudden, I see them starting to try to earn that complexity point, and I kind of want to yell, and like, no, 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 you missed some of the easy points. There's no point in trying to move on to the harder stuff. So really be sure about those first points before you move on. However, so here's what we can do. So option one, especially if we don't have much time or if we're not super confident about our previous work, reread the prompt and carefully then proofread our essay with the rubric in mind. So making sure that we didn't drift off topic, making sure we answer, respond to the prompt, the whole prompt, nothing but the prompt. And so that's a good idea. Option number two is that we could write some more body paragraphs, especially if we haven't used all the documents. And this would be our attempt to earn our complexity point. There are many, many ways to earn this point, and I don't want to burden you with a whole bunch of alternatives. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 what I consider good paths. And if you want more, you can talk to me or look up another teacher's video, I guess. But this is, one option here is to have a third body paragraph where we do address that counterclaim. We said we would in the opening paragraph. We don't necessarily have to if we want to be content with the 6 out of 7 on the score. That's a very good score on this. But if we want to, this is the place that we can do it. Okay, so here we would do the following. So this is one path to the 7. So this is from the rubric language, using documents and evidence beyond the documents to demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of different perspectives relevant to the prompt. So basically the fact that this prompt could be seen from different perspectives, from different opinions could reasonably be formed. So in this case, this is what we would do. We would have a topic sentence that's based on like the third group of documents, the documents that don't agree with us automatically. Same pattern, like use a document and use it to support this counter view. Use a document, use it to support the counter view. That rubric point says we also, if this is our path, we also have to have some evidence beyond the documents that points in this other direction. So we can do that. So if you can think of something that would be good evidence that wouldn't support you but would support this alternate view, you'll have to introduce that. You could, of course, do the happy sourcing as well, but you don't have to. So this paragraph, a third paragraph, isn't required, but one advantage of going this path is that we've already set up a counterclaim in our first paragraph. So we can just pursue that and use the rest of those documents. Okay, so, and we could do happy sourcing if we felt like it. We don't have to, but we certainly could. All right. And that would give us our 7th point. So if we want to go that way, so qualifying the argument with counter evidence and supporting it, great. That's one path. Now, maybe we don't like that path. Is there other paths? Like, of course there are. So another path is explaining all 7 documents. So if we use all 7 documents to make our argument, that is worth the complexity points as well. So what I would do here, again, I'm going to add like a third body paragraph to use these documents that go against me. So it starts just like my last suggestion. So start with the topic sentence and establish a counterpoint, and then use the document and explain the document and use it to support that counter argument, and do that with basically all of the documents. So again, it's not a required paragraph, but it's probably the best way to make sure that you are using all the documents. Okay, and again, we can do happy sourcing if we want. We also can use some evidence beyond the document if we want. But if we're using all 7 documents, we don't actually have to have that evidence beyond the document. So in this case, this is what your points would look like. And notice here that by using all 7 documents, that's worth like an extra point, and we can have our 7 out of 7. Another alternative is that we could do sourcing for 4 or more documents. So if you're pretty good at this, you're always kind of commenting on, the audience or the purpose of documents. Like many authors will just do this with every single document. So if you're pretty good at it, let's do it 4 or more times. So again, we also have to explain why it matters each time we do that. And so now at this point of the essay, we can go back and add some more. Like if maybe we did our couple along the way, but especially being a typed essay, you can move the cursor and just insert, a sentence here or there. That would be another case of doing this. And again, I would try to do this with all 7 of them. So, that way, if we have a couple that are not awesome, we're still getting that point. Okay, so you're sure to get your 4 plus. So in this case, this is how the math would work. And you see here that by using 4 or more of the happy sourcing, we get 2 points there, and we have our 7 out of 7 on the essay. There are other paths, but I think those are like the 3 that I would tell you to really consider. Do we need a concluding paragraph? Maybe if we have time. It's not a bad idea. But what this would be insurance. So if you're not super confident in your contextualization or your claim or your line of reasoning, this is a place to earn it. And same thing on the LEQ. But basically, there are no points here that we haven't already tried to earn. However, when we first start writing an essay, or before we start writing an essay, we're not always clear where we're going 5 minutes after we see the prompt. But after we've been writing for 50 minutes, we may now be clear where we ended up, and it may not be where we expected. So it's a good idea. Like, I would probably reread the prompt, but not reread the essay, or I'm sorry, my opening, like, part of the essay, the opening paragraph. I would not reread that, because then I just end up kind of copying what I said. I would sort of come up with a new restatement of my claim. And contextualization can be earned both leading up to and before this topic, but it can also be earned in the what comes next. So broader events going on after this period. And so that's, you just kind of invert the pyramid that we started with, and that's fine. All right. Let me, that's the ideal, is the 7 out of 7, and I think a lot of my students are able to do that. But let me give you a quick pro tip for test day. Okay, so test day, it's going for real. The clock is ticking. Maybe you're tired or not feeling good or whatever. So here's a thing to keep in mind. Each point of the rubric is all or nothing. So, like, unless you know you have a pretty good chance to do that element well, just skip whatever the element is. Don't waste time attempting things on which you're unlikely to succeed. You want to figure out, here's the points that I'm going to be able to get, no doubt in my mind, and then we can those are the ones I'm going to lock down. So in a sense, to quote Master Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. So you don't want to just try for things. You want to do them and get those points. So for instance, let's say that you're just not confident with happy at all. It's kind of a complicated thing. It destroys the flow of your essay. You just don't really get it. That's fine. Then don't bother at all trying it. Just skip it entirely. Don't get out there and slug away for 20 minutes trying to get good at it in the middle of your test. Like, if you're not good at it, you're not confident in it, you still don't really understand it, just skip it and put your time into the other 6 points. So this might be what your rubric looks like. Is, I make sure that extra time I save, I'm going to have more evidence beyond the documents. I'm going to make sure that I introduce that extra paragraph, even though it won't involve any sourcing. Like, so you can get a 6 out of 7, which again is an excellent grade. Another example, let's say that you're trying to brainstorm outside evidence, and you just read these 7 documents and you're thinking about those, and somebody, in essence is saying, now think about something else, and you can't do it. Okay, like, don't spend minutes and minutes thinking about it. Put your time into the other 6 points. So this might be how your rubric looks. So you're just not going to do evidence beyond the document, but you're going to do, you're going to go some other path to get the points that you need. Another alternative would be, hey, I don't understand document number 7. Fine. Then, like, don't even bother trying. Don't take a guess. You'll probably get it wrong. Don't just, try to figure it out. Find another path. I'm not going to show you another screen of that, but, like, you get the idea. So that's how to do the DBQ. If there's any parts of this that you think could be better explained, let me know. And if you have any questions, obviously follow up with me. I wish you great luck on your AP exams, and I thank you for watching this video and learning along with me.